Number 1.
So, a little background. When I was 13, I used to volunteer at my church in the Go Port. It was basically the class for grade school kids. Anyways, I had been going into the room for about 3 months. The entire time, I had never gotten any weird vibes from staff in the room, and they all seemed like really nice people. After about 2 months though, I began to notice that the pastor of the room would often glance at me. Most people would have thought it was strange that a grown man was staring at some 13-year-old constantly, but for me, I assumed he was just making sure I wasn't slacking off. I don't remember when, but one Saturday, he approached me and quickly asked if I had any social media, and if so, what my users were. My church is rather up to date, so this wasn't an uncommon question. I replied with no, and he gave me this weird look, and I remember it so clearly because it really concerned me, as if he was appalled that I didn't have Facebook. Everything seemed normal after that. It was just a question that I forgot an hour later. But then I was approached by my mom. I don't remember when, but I don't think it was long after. This man, who worked with children, and with me, had been arrested for soliciting minors online. At the time, I remember how stupid I was. Throughout the following week, I had friends approach me panicked, asking if I was okay. And I just said whatever, and didn't care. As more was discovered and the police filled in the blanks, the situation became worse. He had been targeting 13 to 15-year-old girls through the church. I could have been a victim of the horrendous acts if I had a damn Facebook. Looking back a year later, I really can see how horrible it was. Rereading the police reports and coverage just makes my stomach wrench.
Number 2.
When I was 4, in the late 80s, my mother was pregnant with my little sister. My older sister, who was 10 at the time, and I went with my mum to one of her parental doctor's appointments. In the office, I grew restless, so my mum told my sister to take me out to the van and wait for her to finish up her exam. When we walked out of the doors to go to the van, there was a man standing there. He was right outside of the doors, facing the parking lot, but he turned to look at us as we exited. He was tall, at least to me, overweight, had bright red hair, and he was wearing a denim pair of overalls. He was swinging his arms back and forth, and each time his hands would meet behind his back, he would clap them together, then they would swing forward and clap in front of him. Swing, clap, over and over again. I remember feeling very frightened of him immediately, and so did my sister. As we were walking past him, he said at us, "Look at those little girls. I like little girls." I was only 4 years old, but I knew something was wrong about the way he said that. My sister grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't look at him." As we walked, he began to walk after us at a slow pace, still swinging and clapping. It was almost as if he were fine with us walking away from him, because the farther we walked from the building, the more privacy he'd have. We hurried to our van and got inside. My sister told me to lie down in the floor behind the middle seat, so I did, and she locked all of the doors and laid down beside me. He got to the van right after she laid down. We could see him looking through all of the windows and hear him jiggling the door handles saying, "Where are you, little girls?" in a way that you could hear a creepy smile in his voice. We lay there in fear, just waiting. Finally, it all stopped. I don't know if someone came out of the doctor's office and interrupted him or what, but suddenly everything was quiet. We were afraid he was still out there, so we kept lying there until my mum came out. I don't know if this man was insane or mentally challenged or just evil, but I do think that he would have molested us had he been able to get to us.
Number 3.
A little background. I was 18 in my first year of college at a small university 3 hours from my hometown. The dorm where I lived was set up kind of like an older apartment. It had a living room, it had 5 rooms, 3 of the rooms had 2 beds, and the other 2 had single beds, and it had 1 bathroom that had 2 bathroom stalls and 2 shower stalls. My best friend and I shared the first room right off the living room, and my wall was adjacent to these weird roommates, nice but out there, like they would just be walking around naked to and from the bathroom. Well, around November, one of them told us she was pregnant and that her boyfriend was coming to stay for a couple of days to go to the doctor. Not a big deal, as long as he didn't overstay his welcome. So he comes on a Thursday and was supposed to leave that following Sunday. Everything started off normal. He was very polite and kind of flirty with all of us. So that Saturday, my best friend, me, our roommate and him all decided to go to the next town over to bowl and eat lunch. I remember how excited they both were talking about the baby and how he was hoping and praying for a baby girl. But come Sunday, he still had not left yet and started to creep everybody out. Like he would just be standing in the bathroom waiting for you to get out of the shower, or he would just stare at you from the doorway, undressing you with his eyes, and would make these gross sexual comments. So the other roommates and I decided to confront his girlfriend. If he's not gone by Tuesday, we're turning you into the RAs. Thank God he finally leaves Tuesday morning. Flash forward, his girlfriend / our roommate decides to move back home at the beginning of the next semester because she wants to be closer to her family, so we don't hear from her for a while. Then one day I see on Facebook that she has had her baby. I congratulate her and gawk at the baby cuteness. But my best friend and I notice that her boyfriend is nowhere to be seen. I mean, this girl uploads shit tons of pictures and he's not in any of them. After months of speculation, curiosity just got the best of us, so we finally asked her what happened to him. Come to find out, he was in jail for child molestation. He met this woman and kept trying to get her to bring her toddler with her when they met up. When police found out about it, they raided his home and found thousands of pictures of child porn.
Number 4.
When I was 8 years old, I went to a slumber party at my friend George's house. Her older brother, 16, also had a friend named Kyle over. Kyle molested me. He and the brother forcibly separated us. He molested me in one room, while the brother assaulted his sister in the other. When I told her mother, she scolded me and warned me not to tell anyone, or my mother would be angry with me. I believed her, for some reason. George's parents totally ignored Kyle's behavior. He was so blatant about it, that he tried to make me sit in his lap at lunch and put his hand in my swimsuit bottom in the car, with them in the front seat. I probably begged her at least 3 or 4 times to make him leave me alone, and she said, "He's just playing." Not long after, I broke out in a horrible painful rash all the way up to my belly button. I had to tell my mother. The police got involved and the whole story emerged. The older brother had been molesting my friend for years. Kyle got counseling because he was just a juvenile, but he's now a registered sex offender, having been convicted of assaulting other young girls since. Fast forward to me at 17. We left the church where George's family attended, not long after all that happened, and we were going to another church across town. One day, someone taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, it's George's mother. "Oh, hi," she exclaimed, and tried to wrap me in a big bear hug. "We decided to move to this church. It's so great to see you here." Absolutely no recognition whatsoever of the past in her eyes. I had nothing to say to her, so I immediately excused myself. The next Sunday, the whole family, big pedo brother included, comes up and starts talking to me like we're old friends. "How's the family? And you've gotta come over and try this pasta Georgia makes," type shit. Huge fake grins and constant attempts at giving me hugs. This makes me so uncomfortable, I can't even describe it. I make every attempt possible to make it obvious I don't want to talk to them. but they kept persisting. They wanted my phone number, to go to the movies and barbecues. They tried to invite themselves to my sister's birthday barbecue, for God's sake. Why? I've never been able to figure out why. I kept it up for months. It was the final straw in me giving up an organized religion. I stopped going just to avoid them.
Number 5.
So, this story happened to me when I was 15 years old. I was a super lonely kid. My home life was in shambles. Mom was cheating on Dad and told me about it. And I had just started at a new high school the year prior, where I didn't know anyone. Creating art quickly became my biggest coping mechanism. To this day, I still love to draw. I discovered the website DeviantArt around this time and started submitting my drawings every day. Through this, I made some friends online of all ages. Some very talented people were giving me positive feedback on my work, and this really inspired me. In my deep depression, I felt like DA was a safe haven of like-minded people who appreciated one another. For the first time in a long time, I belonged somewhere. I spent many hours talking to some regulars on the site. Even now, 10 years later, a few of them are still in my life, and I cherish their friendship. But this story is about someone who I never want to meet ever again. DeviantArt also allows writers to submit their stories and poetry to the site. One day, I was on the front page and a poem caught my eye. It was more of an angry rant full of weird, twisted imagery and anti-Christian subtext. Sounds stupid, I know, but it was actually quite well written and funny, at least to my 15-year-old self. Being a very angry, depressed high schooler, I was drawn in and decided to check this artist out. Not only was he a prolific writer with maybe 100 poems and stories on his site, but this man was a very talented visual artist as well. He created amazing illustrations of weird, funny creatures. Some of them were a little sexual, like naked women, but most of them were humorous or gross. His name was Tom. The combination of Tom's writing and visual art skills intrigued me. Even though he was 30 years old, I decided to send him a private message. We bonded. Soon, we began to talk on AIM. I would look forward to talking to Tom every day and came straight home after school to connect with him. Chatting for 5 hours was a daily thing for us. In hindsight, my family probably wondered what I was doing, but they never said anything. Anyway, isolating myself in my room wasn't abnormal at this point. I was so grateful for my artistic friend. I could be as dark and as confident as I wanted when we talked. I unloaded a lot of my pain onto him, and he told me about his troubles too. Tom even started to write poetry about me. Happy poetry. It made me feel so special because I had softened this angry dude's heart with my friendship. Or so I thought. He was reliable, always online whenever I came home. After maybe 3 weeks of talking, Tom asked for my phone number because he wanted to hear my voice. I was extremely uncomfortable with this and reluctant. He insisted and gave me his number to call. Fearing I would lose a friend who was so important to me, I finally gave in. I should mention that I'm 23 now, and I'm still a shy person. But at 15, I was painfully awkward and detested phone calls. My heart was racing, and I was shaky and sweaty as the phone rang. Tom picked up. "Hello?" My voice sounded shaky. Tom spoke. I knew his age, but to my relief, he sounded like a teenage boy. This made me feel less uncomfortable, but still weirded out. I had no idea what to talk about, and for some reason, I felt like crying. Tom and I spoke for a bit. He laughed at the awkward things I said, so I guess the conversation went all right. Honestly, I can't remember what we talked about. All I remember is that he barely spoke at all. We got off the phone and talked online more. He said how happy he was to hear my voice. I was still pretty upset, but glad that I didn't disappoint him. I hoped he wouldn't ask me to call him again, because it was such a stressful experience. But I had poured so much time into talking to this man that I was willing to be uncomfortable to preserve our friendship. My self-esteem was non-existent. The next day, Tom wanted to call me again. On the phone, I could hear him breathing heavily. He was masturbating. I talked about my day at school, some random thoughts. He stayed silent apart from the breathing. Then, when I was mid-sentence, he hung up on me. When I asked him what happened over AIM, he told me I wasn't talking about anything sexy. Something along those lines. I apologized and felt a total sense of failure. The conversation then turned sexual. I told him that I was a virgin. In reality, I hadn't even had a real first kiss. Tom was overjoyed by this. Now I really had his attention. At this point, it was May. Our relationship progressed to the point that I let him jerk off to my voice, and even sent him some pictures of me in my underwear when he asked. I had no idea what I was doing, but I felt like I had to obey him or he wouldn't be my friend. He started to write poetry about taking a girl's virginity. To his fans on DeviantArt, they were just fictional poems about a fictional girl. But I knew they were really for me. This both thrilled me and made me queasy. My 16th birthday was coming up in June. Tom and I constantly talked about how badly we wanted to see each other. In the back of my mind, I really missed the days before everything got so sexual. I told him there was no way I could ever fly to Florida where he lived. Tom insisted on seeing me before my 16th birthday. Eventually, we picked a date. He found a hotel near my family's house that was relatively affordable, and even bought tickets to fly out. The plan was that I would skip school that day and spend the day with him so he could take my virginity. I can't remember if he was even going to stay more than one day, to be honest. Before we said our goodnights, Tom wrote, "Will you let me get your ass too?" Not a question. A statement. I came home from school one day, and my mom was extremely solemn. She told me she knew about Tom. Apparently, I had remained signed on to AOL, but I think she actually got my password to see what I was up to. I began to cry and defended Tom at first, but then I admitted that I was terrified of him. I was so ashamed that my mom saw our sexual conversations, but she hugged me and told me, "He won't be coming, I promise." She emailed Tom, which really fucking spooked him. Tom began to yell at me and blew up my phone. He told me that he spent $500 on the plane tickets that he couldn't get back. I never picked up any of his calls. He wrote me tons of emails in all caps. I have a few of them saved. He wrote angry, violent poetry on DA about how I betrayed him. I was devastated and hated myself. On the day Tom was supposed to come visit, I stayed at my best friend's house, which was miles away in a totally different community. My mother gave our apartment building a photo of Tom to make sure nobody let him in. I was totally paranoid that he would pop up for a while after that, but he never did. In fact, I didn't hear from him at all. He stopped submitting any art or poetry. 1 month went by, and Tom was still MIA. My family and I went to Canada for a music festival. Life was slowly going back to normal, and my guilt was fading. Suddenly, in our hotel room, my phone rang. It was Tom. I tried to pick up, and I can't remember why, but for some reason, since we were in Canada, I couldn't talk to him. I think it's because I had an American service provider or something. In any event, he left me messages. My memory of this is very foggy. He may have actually been texting me. I can't remember at all. A few days later, we took a train back to the US, and as soon as we crossed the border, I sent him a text. I apologized for what happened and explained that I was in Canada, but that I missed him, and I hoped he could forgive me. Tom told me the reason he was gone for so long. He said that on the day that he was supposed to come see me, he got very drunk and tried to kill himself. He stabbed himself all over, including his stomach, his left hand, and legs. Feeling last-minute regret, he called his mother, and she called the police. He told me that his whole apartment was considered a biohazard from all the blood. And after he recovered, he spent time in the psych ward. Tom had mutilated himself so badly that the hospital had to amputate his leg, and he lost 2 fingers. He told me this was my fault. I was utterly speechless, and my blood ran ice cold. I refused to believe him, but lo and behold, he uploaded some pictures of himself on DeviantArt. His leg was amputated above the knee, and he was missing fingers. I had seen previous photos of him. That was Tom, all right. It's hard to explain how I feel about the situation. I feel very sad for Tom, but I also understand that this wasn't my fault. I was a very lonely child, and desperate for a friend. Tom was a schizophrenic man and a pedophile, as was later revealed by his explicit poetry about little girls. Eventually, he was banned from DeviantArt, and I never talked to him again after age 16. A few years ago, I looked him up and found his profile on a different site. Admittedly, I was Googling him to see if he was still alive. In his profile picture, he was next to a young woman with his hand over her mouth. It looked like he found someone who was willing to visit him after all. So Tom, I hope you're okay, but please, let's not ever meet.